Hello and welcome to the podcast series Carewell Conversations, raising awareness about the issues and challenges facing family carers who combine work and care. By engaging with employers, HR professionals, employee representative organisations, family carers and the research community. My name is Brian Doyle. I'm the podcast series producer and a researcher with the Carewell Project, a collaboration between University College Dublin and Family Carers Ireland, funded by the Health Research Board. The overall aim of the Carewell Research Project is to promote health and self-care among working family carers. And over the course of this podcast series, we will have conversations with those who have a role to play in supporting working family carers and begin to tease out the challenges and issues facing them and their employers.
Hello and welcome to Carewell Conversations podcast series. I'm Majella Fahy. I'm a lecturer in Human Resource Management at the UCD College of Business and a member of the Carewell project team. Today, I'm joined by David Joyce from the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. David is the Equality and International Officer. You're very welcome, David, and thank you for taking the time for speaking to us today. Before we turn to start talking about juggling caring with paid employment, could I ask you first to tell me a little bit about your own background and a little bit about the Irish Congress of Trade Unions?
Sure, thanks, Majella. Very happy to be here today and to have this conversation with you. My name is David Joyce, as you said, and I'm Equality and International Officer with the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. I have worked for Congress for over 20 years, I suppose now. It's hard to believe, but there you go. Time flies. And my background, I suppose, is in the area of initially international development work, and then coming home and getting more involved in community work here and in development education and areas like that, and getting a role in that sort of international development area within Congress initially, and then broadening out to the equality field. So it's a sort of long and varied, experience and lots of interesting things across my desk in both the equality side and the international side as well.
Okay, that obviously puts you in a very good position though as well in terms of your role of ICTU. You have that background in terms of an understanding of equality and diversity. Could you just also explain a little bit about the Irish Congress of Trade Unions and the role that it plays in, I suppose, shaping employment relations in Ireland?
Yeah, I suppose Congress is the largest civil society organisation on the island of Ireland. We operate in both the Republic and Northern Ireland, and basically we're an umbrella body for trade unions on the island, and there are somewhere in the region of 40 or so now, I think, trade unions affiliated to us who represent something like 750,000 workers on the island across a whole range of different sectors, both public and private. And, we work to achieve, broadly in terms of a vision, we work to achieve a just society, one which recognizes the rights of all workers and citizens to enjoy prosperity and fulfillment, and leading to a good quality of life, and recognize, of course, that that's not just material well-being, but, freedom of choice to engage in all kinds of, cultural and other aspects of civic life as well. And importantly, I think the vision applies not only in the context of the island, but also, European-wide and the wider world, and sort of seeks to challenge the economic order that we have sort of inherited over the years.
Okay. Well, now I suppose turning to the issue at hand, which is family carers. Given that Congress plays such an important role in, I suppose, shaping the discourse and around employees and their well-being in every sense of the word, could I maybe ask you to start by talking to us a little bit about your perspective on family carers and the extent to which their needs are taken into account and facilitated in Irish workplaces?
Yeah, it's an important question. I suppose the figures tell us, I believe, something like 1 in 9 Irish workers are in this position of seeking to reconcile caring responsibilities with their jobs. And I suppose it's reasonable also to expect that over the coming years, as the population gets older, you'll have more people with disabilities and people with caring needs. That this will become a bigger issue into the future. And I suppose from our point of view, then, if there are 1 in 9 Irish workers, it's likely that there's a very similar proportion of our members who are in that situation. And so as a movement, I suppose, that's committed to equality and inclusion, it's important for us that the needs of carers, seeking to reconcile work and caring responsibilities are very much part of our agenda, our broad working agenda. And I suppose we do know, both from talking to unions and from various reports out there, that the costs of trying to do this, juggling kind of care, if you like, and work are considerate. Can interrupt your career and all of the costs that might entail in terms of your promotion aspects, etc., etc. So it's a big issue. Can be very obviously stressful to the people involved, affect their mental health, etc. So, and indeed in circumstances, people have left the workplace entirely because they just haven't been able to juggle the responsibilities in an adequate manner, and they haven't been facilitated to do that by the way we organise our workplaces, etc.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's not only an issue for the people involved, but it's also an issue for employers in terms of losing people who, if they were facilitated in some way, could continue to make a significant contribution in their organizations. So it's in all of our interest, I suppose, to work on this whole area. And to help to kind of create a culture in our workplaces that enable people to reconcile these two very important parts of their lives, and I suppose it's quite topical at the moment, given the kind of recent easing of many of the COVID restrictions, including a phased return to workplaces, and all the discussions about the need to legislate for remote working, for flexible working, etc. So I guess it's a pertinent time to be having these kinds of conversations, given what's out there at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny when you were talking about just your awareness of family carers in their workplace and their needs. I was reminded the fact that I think it's 2 years ago now, it was literally just before we were plunged into the restrictions associated with COVID, that Attracta and I met the Women's Committee in Congress. And it was just prior to their national meeting, their conference in, I think it was February or March 2020. But I can remember at that meeting, they were talking about exactly those issues that you've raised in terms of, I suppose, the pressure that comes to bear on people who are trying to reconcile work and caregiving. But what really came through for me in terms of listening to the discussion of the people who were at that meeting, who were representatives from various different unions who were on the committee, was the impact on employees in terms of being forced to either withdraw from work entirely or to reduce their working hours. And I suppose what they were very mindful of then were, the financial implications of that, but obviously that was the immediate issue, but also even the more longer term issues that are there in relation to, I suppose, disadvantage that arises because, you lose out financially if you have to reduce your working hours and at a time that you may not be able to cope with that. But in addition to that, in the longer term, in terms of having, more limited contact, we'll call it that, with the workforce, you don't have the opportunity to, engage in training and development, promotion, and also further down the road in terms of pension entitlements and so forth. So I was very interested to see that at that point, the Women's Committee of Congress put forward a motion urging Congress to support family carers in the workplace in terms of advocating in relation to their needs. And maybe that just brings me then maybe to the next question that I want to ask you, David, which is, what do you think are the ways in which trade unions can highlight and support employees who are trying to reconcile work and caregiving?
Yeah, I remember our engagements around that time about 2 years ago. Hard to believe it's only 2 years ago, given what's happened since. But we did, you're right, we did manage to have the conference in person in Wexford. And the Women's Committee, for those who don't know, is a sort of an advisory committee within the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. So it advises Congress on, matters as they pertain to women workers, I suppose, mainly, and you're right, they had a big interest in this whole issue of reconciling work and caring responsibilities. And on foot of the engagements we had, they decided as a mechanism to do just what you asked in your question, that is to kind of raise awareness of these issues within the movement, to place a motion on the agenda of the conference in relation to reconciling caring responsibilities and work. And I, in terms of preparing for this conversation, I dug it out because I think the importance of a motion like this, I mean, yes, the content is very important, but even the actual fact that a motion on this topic is on the agenda and sort of leads to discussion at the conference on the issues involved, etc. And I do remember at the conference a number of delegates got up and spoke about personal experiences, either of themselves or of people they knew who, had real difficulties in combining their work and caring lives. And so, the motion sort of, noted, a range of stats, which I'm sure most, you and a lot of your listeners would already be aware of in terms of the numbers of carers, the fact that over half of them are in the labour force, a kind of gender split of sort of 61%, 39%. The fact that an aging population means, as we've said, it will remain and become probably a bigger issue into the future, and the need for more investment in our kind of caring infrastructure, and then went on to touch upon the opportunity, if you like, that the EU work-life balance and the process of transposing that directive, which I know we'll probably talk about in a few minutes, was an important opportunity to raise the ambition and for improving the situation for people in the circumstance we're talking about. So I think that's unions love conferences and motions and debates, and so it's really important that we integrate issues of importance like this into that kind of broader agenda at the conferences, because delegates who are there bring the information back to their own unions, to their own branches. So the conversation we had in Wexford, I'm sure, sparked a number of conversations within different affiliate unions, branch meetings, workplaces, etc. So I think that's a key role that Congress and affiliate unions can play in terms of raising awareness and engagement with the issues we're discussing. I suppose the other area, and I know it's something we will talk about in a few moments, is trying to then, on the basis of those discussions, in our role as the kind of the trade union umbrella body on the island, is to seek to influence policy both in the Republic of Ireland and in Northern Ireland, so that the kind of legislative and policy framework takes good account of those issues and responds in a way that provides real opportunities for people to reconcile their work and caring responsibilities.
Yeah, I think maybe we just move on, David, and talk about that, what you're touching on in terms of the EU directive, because we're kind of dancing around it anyway. But obviously, literally this morning, there was, I think the cabinet are having a discussion around the remote working bill. But in addition to that, the EU directive on work-life balance is due to be transposed into law later this year. So yeah, maybe you could talk a little bit about the impact that you think they might have on helping employees who are trying to, balance work and caring.
Sure, I think it might be worth just saying before we move on to that COVID has been a very significant issue in terms of influencing these discussions. So on the one hand, of course, it has added to people's pressures, in terms of various supports being withdrawn, children, not in school and at home, and day services, etc., being closed, during the real serious lockdowns that we had, and just a general inability for people to even physically separate their work and their kind of home lives. Obviously that's very challenging. But I suppose the other thing then is that the pandemic has also changed everything really when it comes to how we work, from remote working to managing caring roles, and it's kind of taken a pandemic, if you like, to fully awaken us to the potential of flexible working, and people have, generally speaking, found the flexibility and the remote working that the pandemic thrust upon us in a way. It's been a fairly positive experience for most. And I suppose now, and getting back to what you were talking about, the big demand is for a legislative framework to ensure that learning from that experience, we can kind of chart a way forward which balances the responsibilities and rights of workers on the one hand, and of course employers as well, so that we can all benefit from this, from more flexible and remote working opportunities into the future. So we have been calling for legislation for some time now in relation to requiring employers to, give justifiable reasons why they can't concede a worker's request to work remotely or more flexibly, to bring us in line, indeed, with many long-established arrangements in other European countries. So in that context, the EU Work-Life Balance Directive is really, really important, because I suppose it was initially devised in relation to addressing women's underrepresentation in the labour market. to address the work-life balance challenges faced by working parents and carers. And it was also an important step for the EU in that it was kind of the first legislative proposal under the European Pillar for Social Rights. So it was an important step so that people could begin to see practical benefits of EU membership. This was all in the context of Brexit and all of that happening as well, to being a fully fledged EU member. And the main elements, I guess, of the proposal are around paternity leave, 10 working days of leave. That's something, of course, we already have here. Parental leave and a payment attached to that as well. And that has happened since the introduction of the directive, and as the government prepares for full transposition. Carers leave, which of course is very important in the context of what we're discussing, and the need, the ability to take 5 working days per year, and then flexible working arrangements and the rights for parents to request these arrangements has been extended to working carers in the context of the directive as well. It has to be transposed or fully implemented in member states by August of this year, 2022. It's imminent in terms of us benefiting from all of the content areas in it. And of course, Minister O'Gorman has very recently indicated that he's going to introduce a work-life balance bill, which will give a legal right to employees to request flexible working, and also to introduce that 5 days of leave to support family members. And the whole purpose of the bill is to fully transpose the work-life balance directive. I suppose alongside the Taoiseach's right to request remote working, will begin to kind of change the legal framework for all of this to happen. And I suppose, all of that, will help to hopefully will lead to a situation where the ability of people to reconcile work and family responsibilities will improve.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously it's a really positive, I suppose, development that provision will be put in place to have leave 5 days. And I think one of the I suppose issues that's emerged from our own research in UCD, but also, I think any piece of research I've picked up on, and which looks at the views of family carers, where they express what is of most help to them in terms of reconciling caregiving. They talk about flexibility, they talk about access to, or having the opportunity to have autonomy over the way in which they work, the time, and also, the location as well. So in terms of remote working, but particularly that. But in addition to that, I think what's important for family carers is the opportunity to have access to these kind of shorter or more informal opportunities to take leave. So to cope with the unexpected events that occur, so that they can take time off. And obviously that 5 days will facilitate that. However, I'm going back in my mind again to the conversation that was had at the Women's Committee in Congress around whether that leave would be paid or not, and that obviously if it's not paid, it really isn't of much value to some employees, because they're already on low pay, and it would make it really difficult for them to use that leave in the first place. So I suppose I wonder, in terms of Congress's position on that, could you just talk a little bit about it?
Sure. I suppose there's a couple of things in there, what you said. In terms of the right to request flexible working, I suppose the real test for that law will be whether people have confidence that it really requires employers to be fair and reasonable and, transparent and consistent in their considerations of any requests that are brought forward. And I have to say, the details are only coming through as we record this, but the criteria published today in the heads of bill don't appear to us to strike the correct balance between employer and employee needs, but rather kind of mirror this current situation in the UK, where the 8 business reasons, I think as they call them over there, for refusing a request contained in their legislation have been found to basically allow employers to retain and use their own sort of unfettered kind of power to turn down requests for remote working. And I know that's all subject to review over there, but certainly it's a bit disappointing that we seem to be going down that route rather than being a bit more ambitious. And obviously we'll, in our role nationally, we'll seek to, we'll continue our engagement with the Oireachtas members, seek to make the bill more fit for purpose, if you like, in that sense. In terms of payments, I think we've made this case right across the board, both in terms of the new paid parents' leave that's now available to people and will increase to 9 weeks as a result of the EU Work-Life Balance Directive, which is very significant and is very welcome. But the payment, the peer, for the benefit that it attracts, the €220 or whatever the amount is now at the moment, it isn't really sufficient in terms of ensuring that people on low pay, for example, that they just can't afford to live on that benefit, and so if that's all that's on offer, would really seriously have to consider whether they can actually take it, and take the welcome leave that is there. So we have called for indexation in some way of that payment, against a worker's salary. And also, I understand there's an issue around earnings, kind of earnings ceiling that people face if they do work. If they reduce their working hours and they earn more than €330 or whatever, that the benefit then is taken away from them. So there are huge issues there not just in terms of carers leave, but parents leave, maternity leave, paternity leave, for working families who simply cannot afford to take those leaves because of the level of payment that is currently attracted to them. And I think in going forward, we really need to address that issue, and we've made that case on countless for at this stage, including the Citizens' Assembly on gender equality and in various submissions on the right to request flexible working and other areas as well.
That clearly is a major challenge that has to be taken up and addressed. Just on that point of challenges, David, could I ask you, are there other challenges that you would see that arise in relation to supporting employees who are trying to balance work and caregiving?
Well, I suppose, that one we've just talked about is obviously a key one. But in terms of other challenges that are out there. I suppose there is a broad lack of awareness, I think, about some of the issues that we're talking about. Perhaps resistance from some employers, and indeed co-workers who are not in that situation and perhaps don't fully appreciate the difficult situations that carers might find themselves in. I suppose traditionally it's been a lot easier for people to combine parenting responsibilities with their workplace rather than the broader caring responsibilities for other family members. I suppose parenting is something that workplaces are used to dealing with. The broader care agenda and function that people find themselves in perhaps doesn't have the same profile in workplaces as childcare and other issues like that as well. So I think there is a job of work for all of us and I sorry, just before I go on to say what we could do, I think the impact of that has been to create a kind of culture where people perhaps go, maybe I shouldn't rock the boat here and ask for anything. I just kind of carry on and see what I can do. And I think that the challenge for all of us then is to create a culture where people don't have to make that choice. They see that reconciling work and caring responsibilities is something that our workplaces see as a legitimate part of running a business or an enterprise or whatever kind of organization it is. And the benefits, as we said earlier, that can provide for everyone, both the people seeking the accommodations and also for the employer who gets to retain, people who, as I said earlier, can continue to make a significant contribution to those organizations.
So one of the benefits, I suppose, that came out of the pandemic was that family carers were, I suppose, pushed into a situation where conversations had to occur in the workplace about their needs. But research would show that traditionally family carers are quite reluctant for a variety of reasons to raise those kind of concerns that they might have. So I'm just wondering, David, if you could comment on maybe the role that trade unions might play in terms of providing support to carers in those circumstances.
I think, I think you touched on an important point. I think one of the things I was thinking about before our conversation was, as I said earlier, we don't have any hard figures, but I imagine we have somewhere in the region of 1 in 9 members who are seeking to reconcile work and family life, and because of their situation, their ability to get involved in trade union structures, be it workplace committees, branches, getting involved. We talked about our women's committee, etc. It's a very difficult thing for them to do that. So I think it's really important that in our own structures we have ways to ensure that the voices of people who perhaps are not able to be around the table, if you like, for various reasons, including the challenges that carers face, are included in our bargaining agenda, if you like. And that's why I think the role of groups like our Women's Committee is really important, because they tend to, be it through personal experience or through involvement in their own unions and sectors, bring those stories to the fore, if you like, and perhaps another forum may not arise, So it's really important for us to keep those kinds of structures going and to listen. Because, as I said earlier, even the exercise we talked about of bringing the motion to the conference, I'm sure was really important for some people who perhaps didn't even speak, but were either hearing about it or sitting in the audience thinking, "Oh, this is good. This is something which is affecting me or my friend or a family member," and it's really important that the trade union movement that I'm also a part of, takes up the call, if you like, and acts. Our motto is stronger together. So obviously it's a lot easier for a big movement to take on these issues rather than individuals seeking to carve out, individual arrangements with all sorts of different workplaces, So I do think that that's important, and it's an important role for the movement.
Mm-hmm, indeed. Okay, David, thanks very much. Just before I wrap up then, could I ask you a wish for, could I ask you what you'd like to see in the future for this group of employees who are balancing work and caring?
Oh, I suppose I'd go back to that kind of cultural shift, if you like, that we talked about earlier, that supporting carers in our workplaces to stay in work by offering flexible work arrangements. It's a win-win situation, if you like, for everyone, employers, particularly in the market that we're in today. It's very difficult for employers to go out and get the people that they need. So if they have someone already there who, with a bit of accommodation, can be facilitated to remain and deal with whatever caring responsibilities they also have. I mean, that's a win-win for everyone, And I suppose also some of those changes that are needed, both in terms of the application of the Carers Leave Act and the changes that are currently being discussed around the right to request flexible working, that all of that is worked through the system quickly, and so that people can begin to use those new arrangements to their benefit, because as I said, it's a win for everyone, So I think I think the issues we've discussed are really important, and I hope that they will inform the discussions over the coming months, so that if we were to be doing this time next year, we would be talking about an improved environment for people seeking to do this. Not being idealistic in any way that what's going to happen in the next few months will solve all the issues, but that it will help to crack that cultural change that needs to happen, and facilitate people to contribute in the workplace, but also carry out whatever caring responsibilities they're faced with in their private lives.
Absolutely. A good starting point is always have a bed of rights and work from there in terms of using that to then inform culture change, as you've talked about so eloquently. Thanks, David. Okay, David, thank you very much. You've provided, I think, a really good insight into the trade union perspective on family carers and the supports that they need to help them to juggle their caregiving responsibilities alongside the demands of work. So thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me. I'm really grateful to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Magella. And I'd encourage people in the situation we've talked about to try and engage with their union in any way they can, because the more conversations that happen, the more likely we're going to get the change that we need.
Absolutely, totally agree. Thank you, David.
We've reached the end of our Carewell conversation for this episode. I'd like to thank you for listening. If you'd like to hear more from us, please subscribe to Carewell Conversations on your podcast platform of choice, or alternatively, you will find us at carewellproject.com or across our various social media channels, which are linked in our podcast feed. We'd also like to hear from you, our listeners. Please feel free to leave any comments, feedback or suggestions you may have on any of our social media feeds, or you can contact us directly at carewell@ucd.ie. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to you joining us on future